Sunday mornings start the same way. At 5:30, the alarm clock rings, which I immediately turn off so as not to wake everyone in the house. Then it's 15 minutes to ease the pain in my joints, especially my knees, which are aching more after hours of laundry yesterday. Another 5 minutes to make the bed as if no one had slept on it. Next on the schedule was the bathroom, which I had to slip into quietly, lest Charlene claim again that I was disturbing her morning meditation with the sound of water. Though, what meditation at 6 in the morning when she doesn't wake up until 8? In my 68 years, and I live in my own home as a free maid. At least that's what my life has looked like for the past 7 years, ever since my Harold died and my son Quentin and his family moved in with me to take care of Mom. Except that taking care somehow quickly turned into me taking care of them all now. In the kitchen, I make coffee, strong for Quentin, with skim milk for Charlene and hot chocolate for the kids, 14-year-old Dexter and 16-year-old Ruth. Everyone has their own ritual. Everyone has their own preferences. I learned them by heart long ago, like I once learned the multiplication table in school. My family's habits are my new math. The sound of footsteps on the stairs. Ruth comes down first, always with a book in her hands. Good morning, Grandma. She's the only one who really notices me in the morning. Morning, sweetheart. Your chocolate is on the table. I smile as I watch her settle into her usual spot, nose buried in another fantasy novel. Ruth reminds me of myself when I was her age, same dreamy quiet, like she's living in a parallel world. Sometimes I think she's the only one who really sees me, not as a function, not as a piece of furniture, but as a person. 10 minutes later, Dexter comes into the kitchen, headphones on, staring at his phone like it's the answer to all the mysteries of the universe. Dexter, good morning. I try to get his attention. He looks up for a second, nods, and then goes back to the screen. I'm used to it. Sometimes I think if I fell right in front of him, he'd just step over me without taking his eyes off the phone. At 7:30, Quentin shows up. My only son, now 44, always looks the same, preoccupied. His blonde hair is thinning at the top of his head, and there's a permanent wrinkle between his eyebrows. He works as a middle manager for an insurance company, and every day is a struggle for him. At least that's how he sees it. Good morning, Mom, he tosses as he walks, grabbing a cup of coffee. I didn't finish my report. I'll be late. I made you breakfast, I say, but he's already opening the fridge, pulling out a container of yogurt. Charlene says I need to watch my cholesterol, he says, not even looking at the bacon scrambled eggs I just put on the plate. I silently put the plate away. It's not going to go to waste, eat it myself, or give it to Dexter when he's hungry after school. Nothing goes to waste in this house. I remember all too well the days when Harold and I counted every penny. Charlene was the last to come down to the kitchen in a lavender-colored silk robe, her hair perfectly styled, as if she'd been up all night posing. A 40-year-old woman with the figure of a 20-year-old and a gaze that's always looking for flaws, especially mine. It smells fried in here, is her version of a greeting. Marilyn, you know we're trying to eat healthy. Quentin likes bacon on Sundays, I reply quietly. He used to. She pours herself a cup of coffee and adds exactly 1 tablespoon of skim milk. By the way, don't forget to rewash the curtains in the living room today. I noticed stains on them yesterday. I washed the curtains last Tuesday. There are no stains, but I'm nodding. Arguing with Charlene is like trying to talk a hurricane out of destruction. Useless and dangerous. By 8 o'clock, the house is empty. Quentin leaves for the office, even though it's Sunday. Dexter is picked up by a friend for soccer practice. Ruth goes to the library, where she's moonlighting as an assistant in the children's department. Charlene leaves for her women's meeting, a weekly gathering of wives like herself with ambitions higher than their husbands' abilities. The house becomes mine for a few hours. I wash the dishes, wipe down the tables, vacuum the carpets. Then I tackle the curtains, taking them down and loading them into the washing machine, even though I know they're clean. But Charlene will notice if I don't. She always notices what I haven't done and never what I have done. As I'm going through the laundry, I find a note in Quentin's shirt pocket. Don't forget, wedding anniversary is Saturday. That's it. Now I can see why Charlene has been so nervous all week. Next Saturday is their wedding anniversary, 19 years. There's gonna be a party. And surely no one told me about it, though it will be Grandma Marilyn cooking and cleaning up afterward. Of course. I sigh and get on with my work. By 2 p.m., the house is shining clean, lunch is ready, and I can finally sit down with a cup of tea and my old photo album. It's the only luxury I allow myself, a half hour of reminiscing. Here's Harold and I at a wedding, young, in love, sure that the whole world is at our feet. Here's little Quentin taking his first steps, and here we are at a picnic by the lake, one of the last photos where Harold is still healthy. Then there was the illness, long and agonizing, that took not only him, but our life savings as well. Insurance covered only a fraction of the cost of treatment. The sound of a slamming door jolts me out of my memories. Charlene is back earlier than usual, and not alone. She has several women with her, their voices and laughter filling the hallway. Marilyn, she shouts from the doorway. You're not gonna believe this. Carly suggested we have our party tonight. Everyone's already agreed. Quentin will be thrilled. I quickly close the album and get up. Charlene flies into the kitchen, followed by 3 women, all looking like clones of her. Perfect hair, designer clothes, smiles that don't reach their eyes. Ladies, this is Marilyn, Quentin's mom. Charlene introduces me in the tone of a tour guide showing me another exhibit. She lives with us. Hello? I nod, feeling out of place in my homemade dress amongst these polished women. Marilyn, we need to organize dinner for 8. Charlene was already opening the refrigerator, studying the contents. Carly's bringing wine, Betsy's making salads. What do we have for the main course? I made a stew for dinner, I said, but there's only enough for our family. Stew? Charlene wrinkled her nose as if I'd suggested we serve rat tails. No, that won't work. Marilyn, go to the store and get some steaks. I want to surprise Quentin. She pulls out her wallet and holds out a credit card to me, hers, not mine. My card Quentin has kept in a safe place since I allegedly spent too much on Christmas presents for my grandchildren 2 years ago. And don't forget to buy fresh flowers, she adds, and perhaps another bottle of good whiskey for the men. I silently take the map and the grocery list, which she quickly jots down on a piece of paper. My dinner remains untouched. My plans for a quiet evening with a book are canceled. But is that news? By 7 p.m., the house is transformed. The curtains are washed and hung. The table is set for a gourmet dinner. Candles arranged, flowers in vases. Steaks are ready to grill, salads adorned in crystal bowls. I've changed into my only going out dress, a navy blue that hides my fullness and years. Charlene and her friends are chirping in the living room, sipping Prosecco. Quentin arrives at 7:30, surprised and delighted by the surprise. Charlene's friends' husbands soon arrive, as well as their mutual friends, the Morrison couple. Dexter decides to stay the night at a friend's house, while Ruth sits quietly in her room, citing homework. I grill steaks, serve appetizers, pour wine into glasses. No one notices me except for the occasional thank you and can I have more sauce? I'm used to being invisible. After dinner, the company moves to the living room for cocktails. I clear the table, load the dishwasher, make coffee and dessert. As I bring the tray of cups into the living room, the conversation suddenly dies down. I notice everyone is looking at me. Mom, Todd was asking about your famous apple pie, Quentin said with a strained smile. I promised you'd bake one for the next meeting. Of course, I nod, setting the coffee cups in front of the guests. I always wonder how you keep up with everything, Marilyn, Carly, Todd's wife, says, with that special tone that turns compliment into pity. Oh, it's easy when the kids are grown, and there's plenty of time, Charlene answers for me. Marilyn just doesn't know what to do with herself. Everyone laughs politely. I try to smile, but my cheeks burn with humiliation. I really admire her, Carly continues. We had a housekeeper in our family who ran the household just as impeccably. Mom always said a good maid was like being part of the family. Silence hangs in the air for a moment. Even Charlene realizes the awkwardness of the comparison. But instead of smoothing things over, she takes a sip of wine and says with a chuckle, "You know, Carly, you're right. Sometimes when I see Marilyn at work around the house, I feel like I have a housekeeper too. Just yesterday, I caught myself thinking, you look like my maid." Laughter explodes in the parlor. Quentin wrinkles his nose slightly, but chuckles too, not wanting to spoil the atmosphere. The Morrisons exchange quick glances. Todd coughs into his fist, and I stand frozen, empty tray in hand, feeling something inside me break. Not my heart. It's long since learned not to react to Charlene's every barb. No, it's something else breaking, perhaps my patience, or fear, or the habit of obedience. "I'm sorry," I say quietly and leave the room. In the kitchen, I set the tray down on the table and lean against the countertop, trying to calm my breathing. In the reflection of the kettle's chrome surface, I see my distorted face, an old woman with wan eyes and tight lips. A maid, a servant, invisible. A week has passed since that ill-fated party. 7 days filled with routine, but something in me had changed. I still made breakfast, did laundry, cleaned, and smiled when Charlene criticized my efforts. But inside smoldered a small flame of anger that didn't go out, but grew brighter. On Thursday, Dexter approached me with a request, a rarity in our house. "Grandma, I need to do a project for school, something about family history," he said without taking his eyes off the phone. "Mr. Goodman said I need old photos. Do you have any?" "Sure, honey." I was glad my grandson had finally shown an interest in something related to me. "There are albums and boxes of photos in the closet. I can help you find them." "Just bring them to my room," he said as he left. "I want the oldest ones, the ones of great-grandparents, and preferably ones where they're doing something cool." The closet under the stairs was my kingdom, the only place in the house Charlene wouldn't look, too dusty and cramped for her. It held the remnants of my past life, old scrapbooks, boxes of letters, Christmas ornaments we'd collected with Harold, things that didn't fit into the modern interior Charlene had created. I turned on the light and started going through the boxes. The pictures of Harold's parents should be in a cardboard box labeled Family F. I remembered there were pictures of his father working on the railroad. Perhaps that would fit under the category of cool occupation in Dexter's mind. Dust swirled in the air, settling on my hair and clothes. I went through box after box, diving into the memories. Here was a box of little Quentin's toys that I'd saved in the hope that someday they would be useful to his children. Here's Harold's stack of records, the jazz he loved so much. And here's the box labeled Papers. The one I was looking for must be around somewhere. I pushed Papers aside, but the box was heavier than I expected. It slid off the shelf and its contents scattered across the floor. Insurance policies, receipts, old tax returns. The paper history of our life with Harold lay at my feet. Sighing, I started picking up the documents, glancing through them absent-mindedly. Most of them could be thrown away. 20-year-old accounts were hardly necessary. But among the yellowed papers, I noticed a blue folder labeled Wills and Estates. My heart skipped a beat. Harold's will. I remembered that after his death, Quentin had taken all the legal papers, saying he'd handle the probate. He informed me that the house would remain jointly owned. He and I had equal shares. I didn't go into details, overwhelmed by grief and grateful for my son's help. But why is this folder here in the closet? I opened it, and the first thing I saw was an official document with a notary's seal, dated 3 months before Harold's death. Last Will and Testament of Harold Joseph Fletcher, the headline read. My hands shook as I read. All my property, including the house at 622 Maple Street, Loveland Township, I bequeath to my wife, Marilyn Ann Fletcher, in full and undivided possession. I reread that line several times. Undivided ownership, not shared with Quentin. To me alone. What followed was the standard wording and signatures: Harold, the notary, and 2 witnesses. Sitting on the dusty floor of the closet, I tried to make sense of my discovery. Quentin had lied to me. All these years I'd thought I was living in a house that was half my son's, that I should be grateful to him for letting me stay here. And in reality, actually, this house is all mine, legally, documentarily, my house in which I became a servant. I remembered the day Quentin announced that he and Charlene and the kids were moving in with me. It was 2 months after Harold's funeral. I was still walking around like a fog. Mom, we can't leave you alone, Quentin said then. You're not doing well at all. And then there are so many memories of Dad in this house. You need support. I was grateful. I really believed they were moving for me. It was bearable for the first few months. Charlene even cooked sometimes, and Quentin helped with the cleaning. But gradually, I took over all the chores. You're home all day anyway. It's easier for you. You have more experience. The explanations always sounded reasonable. I remembered the day Charlene had started renovations. Without warning, without discussing it with me. Quentin said you were okay with it, she explained when I was surprised to find a designer in the living room with wallpaper samples. My old furniture went to the garage for a future garage sale that never materialized. My stuff moved from the master bedroom to a small room near the kitchen, so you'll be more comfortable doing things around the house. And then I remembered something else, a conversation that happened the week before Harold died. We were sitting in a hospital room. He was already very weak, but his consciousness was still clear. Marilyn, I've arranged everything, he whispered, squeezing my hand with his gaunt fingers. The house will remain yours, completely yours. I talked to Quentin. He promised to take care of you. He's a good boy, our son. Tears ran down my cheeks. There in the dusty closet, among the scattered papers, Harold had taken care of me, and our son. Our son betrayed us both. I gathered up the papers and returned them to the box, except for the will, which I folded neatly and tucked into my robe pocket. Then I found the box of photos for Dexter and left the closet, closing the door tightly behind me. I spent that night in my room, locking myself in and rereading the will over and over. Rage and resentment struggled with confusion. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? I'm 68 years old. I haven't worked in almost 20 years, not since I quit my job in the mall accounting department to care for an ailing Harold. I have a small pension, but is it enough to live on? And where would I live if not here? I woke up the next morning with a clear head and a firm decision. I need advice, professional and friendly. And I knew who to turn to. Wendy Trask was my coworker in accounting. We'd worked side by side for 15 years. After I left, she stayed there a few more years, then got her realtor's license and was now selling real estate. We didn't talk as often as we used to, but we always exchanged holiday greeting cards and occasionally met for lunch. I called her from a landline. I didn't have a cell phone. Quentin thought it was a waste. Marilyn? Wendy's voice sounded surprised. What a nice surprise. How are you? I'm fine, I replied, lowering my voice even though no one was home. Wendy, we need to meet. It's important. Is something wrong? There was concern in her tone. Yeah, no, I need your advice, as a friend and as a realtor. We agreed to meet at Daisy's in an hour. I left a note for Charlene that I needed to buy embroidery thread and hailed a cab, as public transportation was rare in our neighborhood. Wendy hadn't changed much in the years we hadn't seen each other. The same short haircut with graying hair, bright lipstick, and attentive brown eyes. She hugged me when we met, and I felt something inside me thaw. When you live in a house where no one touches you except for the occasional bump, a simple hug feels like a miracle. We ordered coffee, and I told her everything about life with Quentin and Charlene, about the will I'd found, about the years of humiliation. That little lying asshole. Wendy was always straightforward. I'm sorry, Marilyn. I know he's your son, but what he did, it's just. I know, I interrupted her. Believe me, I've thought about it in much stronger terms myself. But what am I supposed to do, Wendy? I don't even know where to start. Wendy finished her coffee and looked me straight in the eye. First, you need to check the current state of the property. Bring me the will and I'll show it to a lawyer I know. If Quentin hasn't remortgaged the house, and that's hard to do without your signature, then the house is yours to do with as you please. What could I want? I asked, feeling lost. You can put it on the market, Marilyn, Wendy said softly but firmly. Houses in Loveland are going up in value right now. You'll get enough to buy something smaller and still have enough to live on. Or you can demand they pay you rent. Or evict them. It's your choice. Evict my own son? A week ago, the very thought of that would have seemed sacrilegious. But now, what if Quentin finds out I'm up to something? I asked him. He might. I don't know, destroy the will or something. You have a copy, and we'll make some more. Wendy put her hand on mine. Marilyn, listen to me. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just restoring justice. This is your home, your life, and it's up to you to decide what to do with them. I nodded, feeling the fear give way to determination. I needed to proceed with caution, but I needed to proceed. When I got home, I found Charlene waiting for me in the living room, flipping through a magazine. Where have you been? She asked without looking up. You've been gone for 3 hours. Nee. I was shopping for thread, and then I ran into an old friend, I said, showing her the dry goods bag I'd thoughtfully bought on the way. We hadn't seen each other in a while, so we got to talking. Charlene turned the page. Next time, be warned. Dexter came home from school and couldn't find lunch. There are sandwiches in the fridge, and I left a note in the kitchen. He didn't notice. She finally looked up. What's wrong with your face? You look different. Different. I tried to keep my expression as neutral as possible. I just had a good time. I haven't talked to people in a while. Charlene went back to her magazine. By the way, I invited the Morrisons over for dinner on Friday. Can you cook something special? And don't forget to buy wine. Quentin will give you the money. I nodded silently and went into the kitchen, feeling the anger rising inside me again. A week ago, I would have obeyed the order without complaint, but now something had changed. I knew the truth, and the truth made me stronger. I met with Wendy again the next day, handing her the will and other documents I'd found. She promised to check everything out and let me know the results as soon as possible. There's one more thing, Wendy said before parting. I found out the current market value of your house. If you decide to sell, you'll get about $350,000. That's good money, Marilyn. $350,000, a sum that could have changed my life, a sum that would give me freedom. For the next week, I lived a double life, outwardly still the same obliging Grandma Marilyn, and inwardly planning my release. Wendy called regularly with news. The will was valid. Quentin hadn't remortgaged the house, apparently too presumptuous to think I'd never know the truth. Legally, I could sell the house tomorrow. But we have to be careful, Wendy warned. If they found out before the time was right, there could be trouble. Quentin could contest the will, claim you were incapacitated when you signed the sale papers, and so on. I didn't sign any sale papers, I countered. Not yet, Wendy smiled. But we're working on it. I have a potential buyer, a family from Denver. They've wanted a house in our neighborhood for a long time, and they're willing to act quickly. Life was taking on a strange new meaning. Charlene's humiliation, Quentin's carelessness, even Dexter's indifference, it all hurt me less now. It was temporary. I no longer felt helpless. I had a plan. On Thursday, Wendy invited me into her office to go over the paperwork for the sale. I told Charlene I was going to the doctor, the only excuse that didn't raise too many questions for her. It's all set. Wendy spread the papers out on the table. As soon as you sign, we'll put the house on the market. The buyers are willing to proceed without an inspection. They just need the pictures and my description. We can close the deal in 2 weeks. That fast? I felt a sudden anxiety. Where will I live? I took care of that too. Wendy handed me another folder. Here's information on apartments for rent. There are some good options within your budget, or you can stay with me while you look for something permanent. I glanced at the documents in front of me. A signature here and my life would change forever. I remembered Charlene's words. You look like my maid. I remembered Quentin's face when he lied to me about the will. I remembered Harold, his last words. The house will be yours, all yours. I took the pen and signed. After signing the papers to sell the house, a week passed. 7 long days filled with a mixture of elation, fear, and guilt. Some nights I woke up in a cold sweat, doubting my decision. But in the morning, when Charlene left a to-do list on the kitchen table without a single please, the determination would return. Wendy called every day with an update. The process was going smoothly. The buyers, the Bruner family from Denver, had confirmed their intention and put down a deposit. Bank checks were in process, but no obstacles were in sight. In 2 weeks, the house will be officially in their hands. And then we'll let your family know, Wendy said. Better to do it post facto so they couldn't interfere. I agreed, though the thought of talking to Quentin was nauseating. How would I tell my own son that I'd sold the house over his head? How would I explain to my grandchildren that they had to move out? Dexter didn't seem to care where he lived, as long as he had fast internet. But Ruth was more complicated. My granddaughter, the only family member who actually talked to me, not gave me orders. It would hurt her to know about my decision, and the thought made my heart clench. Friday morning I was preparing breakfast when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ruth was coming down, as usual, with a book in her hands. "Good morning, Grandma," she smiled, looking up at me over a shabby Ray Bradbury volume. Quentin looked especially exhausted that morning. He'd barely touched the coffee I'd made and refused breakfast. "Everything okay, son?" I asked, noticing his hand shaking as he tried to button the cuff of his shirt. "I'm fine," he cut me off without looking at me. "Just a lot of work. And don't call me son. I'm not 5 years old." After all the housemates left, I started the usual cleaning, but my heart wasn't in the work. Why dust off furniture that will soon belong to other people? Instead, I decided to sort through my things, discreetly, so no one would suspect anything amiss. In Quentin's office, I looked for my old scrapbooks that he had taken for safekeeping. His desk was littered with papers, among which I noticed an envelope with his company's logo, Midwest Insurance Group. I didn't intend to read his mail, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the phrase "final warning" on one of the sheets. Curiosity and anxiety took over. I picked up the letter and ran my eyes over the text. It was a notice of possible dismissal due to systematic failure to fulfill the sales plan and violation of corporate ethics. The letter mentioned some improperly executed policies and conflicts with customers. Next to the letter was a stack of bank statements. The account balance was $820, and that was on a salary that I knew was about $5,000 a month. There was another unpleasant find in my desk drawer, a reminder of an overdue mortgage payment. Not on our house, but on some other property. The amount owed was over $10,000. I carefully put everything back where it belonged and walked out of the office trying to make sense of what I had seen. My son was on the verge of financial ruin. He could lose his job at any moment. He had some secret debts, and I was about to throw his family out on the street. The thought made me sick to my stomach. What had I done? Yes, Quentin cheated me out of my will. Yes, they turned me into a servant in my own home, but they're still my family. A phone call interrupted my torment. It was Wendy with the news. The Bruners are speeding up the process, she announced excitedly. They want to close the deal as soon as next week. That soon? My voice shook. Wendy, I don't know. What's wrong? Did you change your mind? I found some papers. Quentin's in trouble at work. He's in debt. I can't just stop. Wendy was being stern. Marilyn, listen to me. This is not your fault. It's not your problem. Quentin is a grown man. He's responsible for his own decisions, just like you're responsible for yours. Remember what he did with your husband's will? He lied to you for years. I know, but there's no buts. You deserve to be free. You deserve respect. If you stop now, nothing will change. You'll be their servant for the rest of your life. There was truth in her words, painful but true. I sighed. All right, we'll continue as agreed. But, Wendy, I'm scared. That's normal. Her voice softened. Change is always scary, but sometimes they're necessary. In the evening, Ruth returned and we settled in my room to write down stories about the Great Depression. I talked about how my grandma Esther sewed dresses out of flour sacks, how Grandpa Tom fished in the local river to feed his family. They were poor, but they didn't feel miserable. I finished. They had each other, and that gave them strength. Ruth turned off the recorder and looked at me with a long look. Grandma, can I ask you something? Just be honest. Of course, dear. Are you happy, here with us? The question took me by surprise. Ruth was always observant, but I didn't think she noticed the tension in the house. Why do you ask? I was trying to buy time. It's just... She lowered her eyes. I see the way Mom treats you. And Dad, too. It's like you're, I don't know, not a person, but a function. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. It's not right. I felt tears coming to my eyes. All these years I thought no one noticed, that I was really invisible, but Ruth had seen. All this time. Life is complicated, sweetheart. I took her hand. Sometimes we make choices not because they make us happy, but because we have to. But why? There were tears in her eyes. Why do you let them treat you like this? This is your home. I flinched. How does she know? What do you mean? Well, Grandpa left it to you, didn't he? Ruth looked confused. Daddy once told Mommy that the house was all yours, but you were too old to live alone. I overheard it, so Quentin knew I might discover the truth. He wasn't as arrogant as I thought. He was just counting on my weakness and dependence. Ruth, honey, I squeezed her hand. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for noticing me. It means a lot. She nodded and suddenly hugged me, as tightly as she'd done when I was a child. I love you, Grandma, and I want you to be happy. The next few days passed like a blur. I mechanically performed my duties, cooking, cleaning, washing, but my thoughts were far away. I imagined possible scenarios for the future. On Wednesday evening, when everyone had gone to their rooms, I heard sounds from Quentin's study. As I opened my bedroom door, I saw a streak of light under his door. He was still awake. On a sudden impulse, I knocked. Quentin? May I come in? A pause, then his voice, tired and irritated. What is it, Mom? It's late. I opened the door. Quentin was sitting at his desk with his hands on his head. He had a stack of papers in front of him and a laptop with a spreadsheet open. I just wanted to see if everything was okay, I said. You've seemed a little tense. He looked up, his eyes red with dark circles underneath. I'm fine. It's just work. Are you sure? I came closer. Quentin, if you have a problem, you can tell me. I am your mother, after all. He let out a short, unhappy laugh. Yeah, that's right. You'll figure it out, won't you, Mom? His sarcasm hurt, but I didn't back down. No, of course not. But sometimes it helps to just talk it out. Quentin looked at me for a long, appraising moment. Then something in him just snapped. I screwed up, Mom, he said quietly. I screwed up big time. What happened? Everything. He waved his hand. The job, the money, everything. I took a risk. I invested in real estate with a partner. And then he took off with the money, leaving me with debts and an unfinished house no one wants to buy. And at the company, he continued, staring into the void, I tried to cheat on the policies. Nothing criminal, just, optimization. They found out. Now I'm on probation. You told Charlene? Are you kidding? He grinned bitterly. She lives in a world where everything has to be perfect. Her husband can't be a loser. She still thinks I got a promotion last year, when in fact I was demoted. In the morning, I called Wendy. I want to make a change in the contract, I said as soon as she picked up the phone. What changes? There was concern in her voice. Marilyn, this is not the time for. Listen to me, Wendy. I'm selling the house. That's out of the question. But I want to give the family more time to move out. Not 2 weeks, 2 months, and I want some of the money, say 20,000, to be set aside for a deposit for their new place. Wendy was silent for a few seconds. Are you sure, after all they've done? I'm sure. I was surprised at the firmness of my voice. They're my family, Wendy, with all their faults. By late afternoon, Wendy called back with news. The Bruners had agreed to my terms, but with one caveat: they wanted to do a home inspection before the final signing. On the appointed day of the inspection, I saw everyone off and started getting ready for the Bruners' arrival. I put on my best dress, put away all my personal belongings to make the house look more spacious, even baked cookies to put a cozy aroma in the air. The Bruners, Michael and Lisa, turned out to be a pleasant middle-aged couple with 2 teenage children. They said a polite hello and began the tour, admiring the space, the lighting, the layout of the rooms. After the tour, we sat down at the dinner table to discuss the details. The Bruners were pleased with what they had seen and were willing to continue the deal on new terms. When the Bruners left, Wendy and I were alone in the living room. Here we are. She handed me a folder of documents. All that's left to do is sign the final contract. In a week, the house would be officially sold. I took the pen, looked at the signature line. One move of my hand, and there was no turning back. Wendy, I looked up at my friend. What if I'm making a terrible mistake? She sat down next to me on the couch. Marilyn, listen to me. Sometimes in life, there are no right and wrong decisions. There are only the decisions we make and the consequences we live with. You do what you think is right. I nodded and signed the document. It was done. The house was sold. My new life had begun. Wendy left and I was alone in the empty house. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the furniture, reminiscing. This is where Harold hung his first painting. This is where Quentin took his first steps. This is where I cried nights after my husband died. This is where I became invisible. Ruth's room is where I stayed the longest, looking at the bookshelves filled with fiction and poetry, the walls with posters of indie bands, the framed photos. Ruth with friends, Ruth on a school field trip, Ruth and me on her 13th birthday, the only picture of us together. I took the picture off the wall and held it to my chest. What will I tell her when the time comes to announce the sale? How would I explain that I destroyed her world for my freedom? The house was sold, all the papers signed, all the formalities taken care of. I had a week until the Bruners got the keys and moved into their new home. 7 days until my family would know the truth. I hadn't decided exactly how I was going to break the news to them. Wendy suggested just leaving the letter and leaving, avoiding a confrontation. "You don't have to listen to their accusations," she said. But I knew I had to tell them in person. I'm not a coward. And then Ruth deserved an explanation. On Thursday night, 3 days before the Bruners were scheduled to move in, I made up my mind. I cooked a special dinner, every family member's favorite dishes: roast beef for Quentin, baked salmon for Charlene, macaroni and cheese for Dexter, and vegetarian lasagna for Ruth. For dessert, chocolate cake, which I only bake for special occasions. "What's the occasion?" Charlene asked, seeing the table set with candles and the finest china. "I just wanted to have a family dinner," I said, trying to keep my voice natural. "It's so rare for us to get together." Charlene squinted suspiciously, but didn't say anything. She was more interested in the number of calories in the salmon than in my motives. Quentin came home from work at 7 in the evening, tired and irritable as usual. When he saw the table, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "It's someone's birthday and I forgot." "No, just dinner." I smiled, trying to hide my nervousness. "Sit down, it's hot." Dexter didn't get off the phone until after the third invitation. Ruth was the last to arrive. She'd been to the library and returned with a stack of books. When she saw the cake, she looked at me carefully. From the moment she noticed the suitcase, we had a tacit understanding. She knew something was going on, but she didn't press, waiting for me to explain. The first 20 minutes of dinner were relatively peaceful. Charlene talked about her plans to update her closet. Quentin ate in silence, thinking about something else. Dexter gave one-word answers when spoken to. Only Ruth kept the conversation going, talking about the new book she'd started reading. I barely touched my food. I couldn't get a bite down my throat. I looked at my family and thought, how did we get to this point? When did this wall of alienation grow between us? Was it an instant decision to deny me the right to my own home? Or had Quentin gradually convinced himself that it was best for everyone? When everyone was done with the main course, I got up to fetch the cake. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. Before dessert, I took a deep breath as I walked back to the table. "I'd like to say something." Charlene looked up from her phone where she was checking social media right at the table. Quentin looked at me tiredly. Dexter continued typing something under the table. Only Ruth was looking straight ahead and attentive. "I sold the house," I said simply. "The new owners move in on Sunday. You have 2 months to find a new place to live." Silence, ringing, and absolute hung over the table. A second, two, three, then everything exploded. "What the hell?" Quentin jumped up, knocking over a chair. "You can't sell the house. It's half mine." "No, Quentin." I shook my head, strangely calm now that the worst had been said. "The house is all mine, in your father's will, the will you kept from me." My son's face went pale, then red. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You went through my things?" He finally squeezed out. "I was looking through my photo albums," I answered, "and I found the truth. The house had been willed to me, all of it, and you lied." Charlene looked from me to her husband, her perfectly lined eyes widening in shock. "Quentin, what is she talking about?" He ignored her, looking only at me. "You don't understand. I did it for you. You couldn't live alone after your father died. You were broken. So you admit it?" My voice trembled. You admit that you deliberately kept the will from me? Quentin lowered his eyes. Yes, but with good intentions. Well intentioned. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me that I'd held back for years. You tricked me, took my home, turned me into a servant, and all with good intentions? Wait, Charlene interjected, finally realizing the situation. Did you really sell the house without our consent? That's illegal. No, Charlene, I turned to her. It's perfectly legal. The house was my property, and I had every right to dispose of it as I saw fit. We'll sue. She stood up, her voice shaking with rage. We're going to challenge this deal. You can't just throw us out on the street. We have children. I know, I nodded. So you'll get $20,000 for a down payment on a new place, and you have 2 months to find it. That's more than generous considering the circumstances. Generous? Charlene laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. You ruin our lives and call that generous? Grandma. Ruth's quiet voice made everyone turn toward her. Are you really leaving? I looked at my granddaughter, the only person at this table who saw me as a person and not a function. Yes, sweetie. I found an apartment not too far from here. You can come visit whenever you want. Like hell she's gonna come visit you, Quentin bellowed. After what you've done, you're no longer a member of this family. Daddy? Ruth jumped up, her eyes burning with indignation. How can you say that? It's Grandma. Ruth, sit down and shut up, Charlene hissed. You don't know what's going on. I understand perfectly well, Ruth said without sitting down. You've been treating grandmother like a servant for years. I've seen it. I've seen it every day. And now she's finally done something for herself. What do you know? Quentin dismissed her. You're just a child. I'm 16, Ruth countered. I'm old enough to see you using her. That's enough. Dexter suddenly raised his voice. He'd been watching the argument in silence until now, not looking up from his phone. You're all crazy because of you. He pointed his finger in my direction. I'm going to have to change schools and quit the team. Thanks a lot, Grandma. He stood up and walked away from the table, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. I sat there, stunned by the intensity of their reactions, though I'd expected something like this. But it was one thing to imagine the anger and accusations, and quite another to stand under their hail. Marilyn, Charlene said my name like a swear word. Do you realize what you've done? Quentin's having problems at work. We're barely making ends meet, and you're throwing us out on the street like junk. I know about Quentin's problems, I said quietly, but that doesn't change the fact that you cheated me, used me for years. Charlene, you said yourself in front of the guests that I look like your maid, remember? She blushed slightly, but recovered quickly. It was a joke. God, don't you have a sense of humor? Besides, what's wrong with helping out around the house? We work, we provide for the family, and you're retired. It's a normal division of labor. Separation? I grinned bitterly. I did everything. Cooking, cleaning, washing, ironing. You didn't even wash your own cups. And yet you treated me like a second-class citizen. No, Charlene, that's not okay. Quentin sat there with his head down, listening to our exchange. When he looked up, his eyes were a mixture of anger and something else, maybe shame. Mom, he said quietly but tensely, I understand that you're hurt, but selling the house out of revenge is low. Do you realize what you're doing to us? With the kids? How are we going to find a new place with my credit history? Where are we going to go? Did you think about that when you lied to me about the will? I asked. When you decided you had the right to control my life? When you let your wife treat me like a servant? He was silent, and I could see the answer in his eyes. No, he didn't. He was only thinking of himself, of his own interests, of his own convenience. I didn't do it out of revenge, I continued. I did it to be free, to feel human again. Freedom, Charlene snorted. At 68? What are you going to do on your own? Who needs you? Her words hurt more than I'd expected, because somewhere deep inside, in a dark corner of my soul, I was asking myself the same questions. Who needs me at my age? What will I do alone? It's better to be alone than with people who don't respect you, I answered, trying not to let my voice shake. You're gonna regret this. Quentin pounded his fist on the table. You'll regret it when you're in your cheap apartment, alone and unwanted. And don't come crying to us. Don't worry, I won't. I stood up. I've already packed my things, and I'm leaving tonight. Wendy's picking me up in an hour. You've already planned everything. Quentin shook his head. Behind our backs. And you talk about trust. I've learned from the best, I replied with bitter irony. Quentin stood up abruptly and left the room without another word. Charlene followed him, giving me a hateful look. Only Ruth remained seated at the table, staring at me wide-eyed. Grandmother? She stood up and walked over to me. I didn't know you were going to leave so soon. It's for the best, dear. I stroked her cheek. Otherwise, the atmosphere will become unbearable. Can I come with you? I was taken by surprise by her question. Ruth, I'd like to, but, you're a minor. I can't take you away without your parents' consent. She's got her head down. I know, it's just, I'm gonna miss you. We'll see each other. I hugged her. I promise, even if your father doesn't want you to, you'll always be able to find me. I went up to my room to get my suitcase. Everything was already ready: clothes, documents, a few books, and photos. Everything that was left of my long life fit into one suitcase and a small box. As I walked downstairs, I heard loud voices coming from Quentin's office. He and Charlene were arguing. It's your fault, she shouted. If you hadn't hidden that damn will, we wouldn't be in this situation. Do you think she would have let us live here if she'd known the truth? Quentin snapped at her. And then who was it that constantly humiliated her? Who treated her like a servant? You, Charlene. Oh, now it's my fault? Just admit it. You screwed up. First with that stupid investment, now with the house. What's next? Are we going to live in a cardboard box? I walked on by, not wanting to hear anymore. Their problems were their problems now, not mine. Ruth was waiting for me in the living room, with a letter in her hand. I wrote you my friend Emma's address, she said, in case, well, if Dad intercepts our messages or something, you can write to me through her. I took the letter, touched by her thoughtfulness. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep it safe. The doorbell rang. It was Wendy coming to get me. She came in, looked around the messy dining room. No one had cleared the table after the disastrous dinner, and looked at me questioningly. Did everything go as expected? She asked. Worse, I sighed. But it's over now. Wendy took my suitcase, and I hugged Ruth goodbye. I'll call you as soon as I get settled, I promised. And remember, no matter what happens, I love you. I love you too, she whispered, holding me tightly in her arms. Stay strong, Grandma. As Wendy and I walked out onto the porch, I turned around to look at the house. My house, which wasn't mine anymore. Strangely, I felt no regret, only relief and quiet sadness. Ready? Wendy asked, opening the car door. Ready? I nodded. We drove through the familiar streets of Loveland to the eastern edge of town, where my new apartment was located. Wendy had found it for me, a small one-bedroom apartment in an old but well-maintained building. Second floor, park view, close to the bus stop. Not luxury, but a clean, bright place I could call my own. Here we are. Wendy stopped the car in front of the three-story brick building. My new landlady, Mrs. Pruitt, was waiting with the keys, a full-figured woman in her 60s with a kind face and shrewd eyes. Welcome, Mrs. Fletcher. She handed me the keys. I hope you'll be comfortable here. Thank you. I took the keys. feeling their weight in the palm of my hand, a symbol of my new independence. We climbed the stairs to the second floor. The apartment was empty and cool. Bare walls, minimal furniture, a bed, a table, two chairs, a couch, everything I'd bought in the last few days. I know it doesn't look like much, Wendy said, seeing my face, but you'll get used to it. The important thing is that it's yours. Yes, I looked around the room. It's mine. Wendy helped me unpack, hang the curtains, arrange the few knickknacks I'd brought with me. By 10 p.m., the apartment looked a little more settled, though still a little empty. Would you stay the night? I asked when we were done. The couch folds out. Sure, Wendy nodded. I don't want to leave you alone the first night. We settled in the kitchen with tea, silently looking out the window at the night park, lit by the sparse streetlights. How are you? Wendy finally asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. Devastated, agitated, scared, all of the above. It's okay, she squeezed my hand. You took a huge step, a brave step. What if Charlene's right? I voiced my deepest fear. What if it's too late to start over at my age? What if I'm just gonna be a lonely old woman in a small apartment? Marilyn, Wendy looked me straight in the eye. I'd rather be a lonely old woman in my own apartment than an invisible maid in someone else's house. And besides, who said you'd be lonely? You've got me. You've got Ruth. There will be new acquaintances, new interests. I nodded, though my doubts persisted. Change is always frightening, especially at my age. But the choice had been made, and there was no turning back. Later, lying in my new bed, in a quiet room where I couldn't hear Quentin's snoring, Charlene's footsteps, or Dexter's music, I thought about the day before, about the anger in my son's eyes, about Charlene's scorn, about Ruth's sadness, about the house that was mine and will be no more, a new life that begins tomorrow. I didn't know if I'd done the right thing. I didn't know what lay ahead. But one thing I did know was that I was no longer invisible. I was a person again, a person who makes decisions and takes responsibility for them. With that thought, I finally fell asleep in my small apartment on the outskirts of Loveland, feeling free for the first time in years. It had been 3 months since the day I stepped into my little apartment on the outskirts of Loveland. 92 days of a new life. A life where I don't have to get up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast for the whole family. A life where I can leave an unwashed cup in the sink if I'm tired. A life where no one criticizes my cooking skills or the way I fold laundry. My apartment was slowly getting cozy. I bought a few plants and put them on the windowsills. I hung curtains that I'd chosen to match my taste, with small floral patterns rather than the minimalist drapes Charlene favored. Pictures appeared on the walls. Old pictures of Harold, of little Quentin, of my parents. A past I didn't want to forget, no matter what. In the mornings, I would go out to the park and feed the pigeons. Some already recognized me and flew in as soon as they saw my figure on the bench. These simple rituals gave me a sense of permanence that was sorely lacking in the first weeks after the move. Wendy stopped by often, sometimes staying for dinner. She'd tell me the news of the city, which came late. I hardly ever left my neighborhood for fear of accidental encounters with Quentin or Charlene. They're getting divorced, Wendy informed me one evening as we drank tea in my tiny kitchen. Quentin and Charlene. Barbara Higgins from the real estate agency is a friend of Charlene's, she told me. I set the cup on the table, feeling something inside clench. Despite everything that had happened, Quentin was my son, and the thought of his family breaking up hurt. Are you sure? I asked. Wendy nodded. Charlene filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. The reason was irreconcilable differences, but Barbara said the real reason was financial problems. Quentin lost his job. This news didn't come as a surprise to me. I remembered the warning letter I found in his office. And the children? My voice shook. Charlene wants full custody. Quentin agrees to all the terms, as long as she doesn't demand more child support, which he can't pay anyway. I shook my head. My son. My little boy who used to bring me flowers from the backyard and swear he would always take care of me. Now he's lost everything, his job, his wife, maybe his kids. It's not your fault, Marilyn. Wendy read my mind. Their marriage was falling apart long before you left, and Quentin's problems at work didn't start yesterday. I know, I sighed, but I can't help but think that my leaving was the last straw. Maybe. Wendy didn't argue. But it was their test, and they didn't pass it. Don't blame yourself for other people's decisions. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about Quentin, about my grandchildren, especially Ruth. We'd seen each other secretly a few times. She'd come to see me after school when my parents thought she was at the library. But I didn't know how the divorce would affect our meetings. The next day, as I was coming back from the store, Ruth was standing at the front door of my house, pale, with reddened eyes, but determined. Grandma, she threw herself around my neck as soon as she saw me. I need to talk to you. We went up to the apartment. I made tea and took out the cookies I'd baked the night before. Ruth sat hunched over on the edge of the couch, tugging at the sleeve of her sweater. They're getting a divorce, she said at last. Dad and Mom. I heard. I sat down next to her, taking her hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. How's Dexter? He's furious, Ruth sighed. He blames you for everything. He says if you hadn't sold the house, everything would still be the same. He refuses to even hear your name. I nodded, feeling a stab of pain. Dexter has never been close to me, but he's still my grandson. And the fact that he hated me was bittersweet. We talked for hours. Ruth told me that she and Dexter were now living in a small apartment with her mother. Charlene got a job at a clothing boutique, not the career she'd dreamed of, but something. Quentin rents a room from a friend and sees the kids on weekends. And our house, your old house, Ruth corrected herself, is for sale again. How so? I wondered. The Bruners had just moved in. Mr. Bruner got a promotion and they're being transferred to Chicago, Ruth explained. They're leaving in a month. Mom's furious says, if she'd known, she never would have moved out and just bought the house. Would you have? I asked, knowing the answer. No, of course not, Ruth smiled sadly. They don't have that kind of money, especially not now. When Ruth left, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at the park in the evening sun. There were conflicting feelings inside me. On the one hand, I was bitter that my family had broken up. On the other, a strange satisfaction that justice had been served. Quentin had deceived me, and now he was paying for his deception. Charlene had humiliated me, and now she was working in the store herself, serving the same arrogant customers she'd been. Was this revenge? I didn't plan to destroy their marriage or Quentin's career. I just wanted freedom, dignity, respect. But in the back of my mind, a tiny voice whispered, they got what they deserved. And then another voice said, but at what cost? At the cost of suffering for Ruth and Dexter, my grandchildren, who were innocent. At the cost of breaking up a family that, for all its faults, was still my family. A week after Ruth's visit, Wendy arrived with an unexpected offer. I'm selling my agency, she announced, sitting down in my only chair. I'm retiring, but I'm not going to sit idly by. What are you planning? I put a cup of coffee in front of her. I'm moving to Boulder. I always wanted to live in a small town in the foothills. Bought a house there. Old, in need of repair, but with a huge garden. And you know what? Her eyes sparkled. There's an outbuilding that could be turned into a little store. I'm thinking of opening an antique shop. I've always loved antique things. That sounds wonderful. I smiled, happy for my friend. And I want you to join me. She leaned forward. Marilyn, there are 3 bedrooms in the house. One would be mine, one for guests, and the third could be yours. We could run the store together. You always knew antiques better than me. I froze with the cup in my hand, not believing my ears. You're inviting me to live with you? And work together? Exactly, Wendy nodded. Look, we're both single. We're both retired, but we're still going strong. We'd have more fun together. And then, she lowered her voice, as if sharing a secret, Boulder is 2 hours from Loveland. Ruth will be able to visit you on weekends. Yeah, I don't know what to say, I mumbled, tears welling up in my eyes. Say yes, Wendy smiled. New town, new people, new business, a chance to start fresh, unburdened by the past. I didn't give an answer that night, asking for time to think, but I knew in my heart that I'd say yes. The apartment on the outskirts of Loveland was the first step to freedom, but not the last. It was a refuge, a place to lick my wounds, but not a place where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. 2 days later, I called Wendy and said yes. She shrieked with joy like a girl and immediately started making plans for us to move in. I listened to her, smiling, infected by her enthusiasm. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future with hope instead of fear. I told Ruth about my plans the next time I saw her. She was upset that I was moving on, but was happy to know that she would be able to visit me. You'll have your own room in the house, I said. A view of the mountains. Wendy already bought a bed for it. Did she? Ruth's eyes sparkled. Grandma, that sounds wonderful. I'm so happy for you. There was more support in her sincere joy than in all of Wendy's consolations. Ruth wanted me to be happy, even if it meant more distance between us. For the last week before I left, I busied myself with packing and saying goodbye to Loveland. Though the last few months had been filled with pain, this city had been my home for over 30 years. Here I raised my son. Here I buried my husband. Here I survived betrayal and found new strength. On the day I left, I decided to do something I had thought about, but had hesitated to do all these months: drive past my former home. Not to stop by, not to meet the Bruners, just to look from afar at the place where most of my life had passed. I asked Wendy for a ride, and after a moment's hesitation, she agreed. Are you sure? She asked, stopping the car on the opposite side of the street. It might hurt. I'm sure, I nodded. I need to say goodbye. I got out of the car and walked slowly down the sidewalk, looking at the house across the street. There was a for sale sign on the lawn with the agency's phone number. An unfamiliar car was parked out front, with a car with the real estate firm's logo next to it. New potential buyers were looking at the house. I saw a young couple with a child about 5 years old come out onto the porch accompanied by a realtor. A young woman with a notebook in her hands. They talked about something, the woman nodding, the man shaking his head. The usual process of buying a house, the birth of new hopes, new plans. I looked at them, and something inside me changed. The bitterness and resentment I had carried in my heart for so long was beginning to melt away. This was no longer my home, and maybe it never really was. Home is not walls and a roof. Home is a place where you are respected, valued, loved, where you feel safe, where you can be yourself. A little boy, the potential buyer's son, suddenly ran across the lawn, laughing and waving his arms as if he were mimicking an airplane. His mother shouted something, but not sternly, but with a smile. The father picked up his son in his arms and lifted him high, causing a new explosion of laughter. I smiled involuntarily. Maybe this family would have better luck in this house. Maybe they'd fill it with the love and respect that Quentin, Charlene, and I were sorely lacking. It's time to go, Wendy's voice brought me out of my reverie. She walked over and stood beside me, putting her hand on my shoulder. It's a long drive, and we still have to unload today. I nodded and took one last look at the house. Strangely, I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge that I'd expected. There was no gloating at the thought of Quentin and Charlene losing everything and me starting a new life. There was only a quiet sadness and a realization. Revenge didn't make anyone happier. Not me, not them. But my leaving, my rebellion against injustice, gave me something I hadn't had in years: dignity, self respect, the ability to choose, freedom to be not just a function in someone else's life, but a person with their own desires, dreams, plans. We pulled onto the highway leading to Boulder. Ahead lay the mountains, majestic, ancient, unchanging. I looked out the windshield and thought about how life doesn't end at 68. It simply takes on new forms, like ashes from which new life can be reborn, like wings that spread after a long sleep. "What are you thinking about?" Wendy asked, keeping her eyes on the road. "That it's never too late to start over," I answered. "It's never too late to remember who you are." Wendy smiled and turned on the radio. The car sped down the highway, leaving behind Loveland, my former home, my past life. Ahead was Boulder, a new home, a new business, new opportunities, and maybe a reconciliation with what was and what would be, who I was and who I was becoming.